Now, if you're gearing up for your CMA exams, you already know that mastering cost and variance measures is absolutely critical. And let's be real for a second, it's also notoriously tricky for a lot of candidates. But hey, don't worry. We're going to take a concept that usually trips people up and make it incredibly clear and, dare I say, intuitive. By the time we wrap up our session today, you are going to be completely confident in your ability to analyze performance way beyond just those static numbers.
Here's a quick look at our agenda for this explainer so you know exactly what to expect. Section 1. The fair comparison problem. Section 2. Enter the flexible budget. Section 3. Unpacking the master variances. Section 4. Flexing the budget example. And finally, Section 5. Master the CMA exam.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the fair comparison problem.
Okay, let's dive right into this. To really grasp why we need advanced budgeting techniques, I want you to step out of the accounting office for just a second and imagine you're coaching a basketball team. You've planned out your team's energy and hydration strategy for a standard 30-minute game. But man, it's a tight match, and the game ends up going into double overtime, ultimately lasting a grueling 50 minutes. When the final buzzer sounds, you look over at the bench and realize your players are absolutely wiped out and they've chugged way more water than you budgeted for. Are you mad at them for being inefficient? No way, of course not. It would be completely ridiculous to evaluate a grueling 50-minute performance against a 30-minute plan. Yet, in the CMA world, comparing a static budget, which is just our original plan, to actual results when the actual volume of activity is shifted, that's the exact same mistake. It's honestly one of the most common errors managers make, and it almost always leads to totally misplaced panic. Bottom line, it's just not a fair comparison.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, Enter the flexible budget.
So if comparing an overtime game to a regular game's plan is fundamentally flawed, we obviously need a fix, right? We need a bridge that allows us to make fair apples-to-apples comparisons. Let's break down the difference here. A static budget is prepared before the period even starts. It's totally locked in. It's based on only one single predicted level of activity. But as we all know from living in the real world, the actual level of activity is rarely exactly what we predicted months in advance. Enter the flexible budget. This is our bridge. It isn't stubbornly stuck on that one old prediction. Instead, it dynamically answers a much better question. What should our costs have been, given the actual level of activity we just achieved? It adjusts our expectations to match reality, which is exactly the kind of insight a good manager needs.
So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding exactly how to calculate it. Here is the core rule, and honestly, grab your notes because you're definitely going to want to write this down for exam day. To build a flexible budget, you take the actual quantity of output and multiply it by your standard or budgeted prices and variable costs. Now, I really want to emphasize a classic exam trap right here. Pay attention to this. While your variable costs will naturally flex up or down with your volume, your fixed costs stay the exact same as they were in the static budget, assuming you're staying within your relevant range. Remember, fixed costs generally do not care how many units you produced, but variable costs absolutely do. Grasping that fundamental difference is exactly how you build an accurate flexible budget.
Moving right along to Section 3, Unpacking the master variances.
You know, when we just compare our actual results straight to a static budget, it's essentially like staring into a black box. It screams at us that we were off, but it absolutely refuses to tell us why. Was our sales team just amazing this quarter, or was our production team incredibly wasteful? A total static variance just won't tell you. So we have to break it apart. The very first piece we pull out of that black box is the sales volume variance. This is simply the difference between the flexible budget and the static budget. What's brilliant about this specific metric is that it completely isolates the volume effect. Because we're using standard prices for both of these budgets, any difference here shows us the financial impact solely because we sold more or fewer units than we originally planned. It strips away all the distracting noise about cost control and just straight up tells us the financial impact of our sales team's volume performance. Now, the second piece we pull out of the box is the flexible budget variance. This is the difference between your actual results and the flexible budget. Now listen closely here, guys, because this is a favorite topic for the CMA exam. Because the volume is now the exact same for both the actuals and the flexible budget, volume is completely neutralized here. Let that sink in for a second. Volume is neutralized. Therefore, this variance purely isolates efficiency and price control. If the exam asks you to investigate why a plant manager was inefficient or overspent on raw materials, this is the exact metric you must look at. It holds them accountable only for what they can actually control.
All right, Section 4, Flexing the budget example. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is seeing all of this actually come together in a real-world scenario.
Let's take all of this theory we just covered and put it into practice. Walk with me through these numbers, assuming a straightforward $5 per unit standard variable cost. Under the static budget, we planned for a volume of 1,000 units, which at $5 a unit gave us a budgeted cost of $5,000. But look at the actual results over there. We actually produced 1,200 units, and it cost us $6,300. Now, at first glance, a manager looking at the $5,000 static budget versus the $6,300 actual cost might absolutely panic and shout, "We have a terrible $1,300 unfavorable variance. What on earth went wrong?" But wait a second. We produced 200 more units than planned. So let's build our bridge in the middle column. Our flexible budget uses the actual volume of 1,200 units, multiplied by our standard cost of $5. That gives us a flexible budget of $6,000. Suddenly, that $1,300 difference doesn't look so terrifying, does it? Because a huge chunk of it is literally just driven by making more units.
And boom, there it is. This brilliantly illustrates our point. By comparing the $6,300 in actual costs to our newly calculated $6,000 flexible budget, our true flexible budget variance is actually only $300 unfavorable. So the production manager was only inefficient to the tune of $300, not $1,300. That other $1,000 of the original scary difference, that was simply the sales volume variance. We spent $1,000 more strictly because we successfully produced and sold 200 more units. See how much clearer and, frankly, fairer the picture becomes when you flex the budget? You literally just saved the production manager from a very unfair performance evaluation.
And that brings us to our final section. Section 5, Master the CMA Exam.
As your teacher, my absolute biggest priority is making sure you feel confident, cared for, and totally ready to crush these questions on test day. So, here's your cheat sheet, my golden rules to live by. First, burn this formula into your memory forever. The flexible budget always uses actual output multiplied by standard prices. Second, remember the trap. Fixed costs generally do not change in a flexible budget. You only flex those variable costs. And third, think of the flexible budget variance as the manager's report card for cost control. A true CMA knows that separating the volume effect from the efficiency effect is the only real way to fairly evaluate someone's performance.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a quick question to test your new intuition. If your company's volume dramatically increases, but your factory's efficiency suddenly drops, what exactly will your flexible budget variance reveal? Think about how that volume noise is stripped away, leaving only the pure cost of that inefficiency. I highly encourage you to grab your practice questions right now while this is totally fresh in your mind and try flexing a few budgets yourself. You've got this for sure. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I absolutely cannot wait to see you conquer the exam.